Hey guys, it's Cyrus of Chaos. Today I want to talk about a big problem that we have in the world of fencing. I know that I've said that many times recently, but in my opinion, this problem is the primary factor that is leading to the recent flood of corruption allegations that have been plaguing our sport. That problem is that the written rules no longer reflect the current trends of what the referees call. And for the rest of this video, we're going to call those trends convention, just for the sake of brevity. It's easy to see where the problem comes from once you understand that it exists, because the written rules are not the same as the conventions, either of which can be used at the discretion of the referee, which creates an extreme inconsistency that's kind of baked into the system. So a real-world example of this, because in abstraction this can be very confusing, is that in the US, the speed limit signs that are posted all over the place are not the threshold of which you pass it to get a ticket. So what I mean by that is, even though a speed sign might say 30 miles per hour, in reality, everyone drives somewhere between like 5 and 10 miles per hour faster than the actual posted speed limit. And it's generally accepted that you won't get a ticket unless you're going faster than that. But this creates a weird situation where everyone is essentially breaking the law all the time, but nobody gets punished for it until it becomes extreme. So if you're driving 15 or 20 miles per hour over the speed limit, it becomes much more likely that you will get pulled over for speeding. But it could technically still happen even if you're going 5 or 10 miles per hour. And I was once driving on a road in an area where I was told afterwards that the police are very strict with the speeding laws. So at the time, I was going probably about 35 miles per hour in a 30 mile per hour speeding zone. And while I was driving on the road, I saw flashing lights in my rear view and heard the telltale sirens that meant that I was getting pulled over. When I rolled down my window to talk to the officer, he asked me if I knew why I was being pulled over, and I legitimately didn't. I was like, I actually don't. Do I have a taillight out? Did I accidentally roll through a stop sign? Like, what happened? And he said I was speeding. Do you know how fast you were going? I said, I think I was going around 35 or 36 miles per hour. And he's like, the speed limit is 30, sir. You were speeding. I told him I was very surprised to find out that I was being pulled over for going 5 or 6 miles per hour over the speed limit, to which he replied, you just acknowledged you were speeding. Here's your ticket. And I have to say, this encounter really jarred me, because every time you go anywhere in a car in the United States, everyone is literally speeding all the time. This means that if someone wanted to, they could pull you over for doing a 31 in a 30. And even if the cars around me were going faster than me, or I was just going the flow of traffic, I would still be breaking the law, and him pulling me over would be entirely legal, even though it's against established convention. And that's the situation that we have in fencing right now for basically everything. Every officer has their own interpretation of the law. So different officers could pull you over at different times for different speed limits, depending on what color the car is you're driving. And until the actual situation comes up in fencing, nobody is actually required to tell you how they call certain situations, and there are almost no checks in place to make sure that that interpretation even is coherent, updated, or makes any sense. And I can't think of a single other sport where this is the way that things work. In other sports, the rules for scoring and infractions are clearly defined and enforced, yet we don't have that in fencing. The only even vaguely similar situation I can think of in any other sport is in baseball, where the strike zone is supposed to be between the shoulders and the knees, But in reality, the top part of the strike zone ends up being closer to where the elbow is, because this is too high to be able to really hit the ball with any force or control. Maybe there's other examples, and if there are, please let me know in the comments. But essentially, in this video, I'm going to discuss several examples of technical rules that are in the rulebook right now that definitely shouldn't be, and my opinion on why we need to change those things, and in some cases I'll be talking about what we need to change them to if I don't think they should just be outright removed. We'll also be discussing some quirks of the rules in general that you just might not know. So to start this process off, I'm actually going to show you several example touches that I filmed with the help of 2 other coaches. Then we're going to talk about how the rules and conventions each apply to these touches. I'm going to show you the first touch from 2 different angles, and I've pinned a comment with 2 responses in the comment section of this video. And for the first touch, I would like you to vote by liking one of those responses on that pinned comment for how you think this first touch should be scored. And I'm going to play that touch right now. So there are going to be 2 rules that apply to most of these situations. One will be explicitly written in the foil section. One will explicitly be written in the sabre section. I'm purely going to be discussing the sabre section. So when most of you voted on that touch where my opponent established point in line, I beat the blade, and then my opponent and I both hit each other, him with the point and without breaking the line, and me just immediate and direct with no waiting for the line to reset, you probably guessed that that's my touch. However, this is actually, according to the rules, my opponent's touch. T102.1 in the rules specifies that if the attack is initiated when the opponent has his point in line, the attacker must first deflect the opponent's weapon. Referees must ensure that a mere contact of the blade is not considered as sufficient to deflect the opponent's blade. So that makes an explicit exception saying that if you beat the blade, but it doesn't actually move off target, it just like tinks a little bit, then it's still a valid point in line. I'm going to play an example on the screen of where I actually do deflect the blade enough for it to be considered no longer line as per the rules. But I want you to consider the situation of what would happen if in a high stakes bout, like considering maybe a 14-14 hypothetical situation in the finals of a World Cup, if one person had point in line and the other person barely touched the blade, then hit that person, and the situation I just outlined in the video took place. What do you think would happen? Probably the coach of the fencer who didn't have point in line would go ballistic. And in this case, they would have the right to, because that is a call that's being made in direct opposition of the current conventions we have, which is that any blade contact means the line is no longer valid. But the situation that I just outlined would be perfectly valid, and if I quoted, well, according to rule T102.1, the fencer did not fully deflect the blade of point in line, the line is still valid, I could defend that decision in the rules, even though it doesn't make any sense by convention. So that's the first example. And last but not least, I'd like to thank my Emerald and Platinum patrons, David Amrani, Jonah Atkinson, Tiffany Miller, Roman Bruce, and Veronica Saran for their very generous contributions to this channel. Any other names you see are gold patrons. Thank you guys so much for the contributions. They really help out a lot and will enable me to make more videos like this. If you have any more ideas for what you want to see next, you can vote on those things on my Patreon page. To help support the channel, you can find links to my Patreon, PayPal, and Venmo accounts in the video information. Thanks guys, see you next time.